I'm Monique Fennick from Australasian Supply Chain Institute. It's a pleasure to have you with us today. Welcome. We'll start with an ASCI National Office update, but kudos goes to Marco Solis for today's webinar from the Victorian chapter for identifying SCOR as a really important issue to address in our community. So thank you to you, Marco. So our keynote from the APICS SCOR P program is our instructor, Denzil Rodrigues, and we also have a keynote from SoftwareAG's Director of Business Transformation, Michiel, Jorna, with us as well. So there'll be a Q&A session, so hold your questions to the end. That would be fantastic. So without further ado, I'll kick off with the National Office update before introducing our keynotes in more detail. We're really excited. Last week was the launch of our new entry-level registration, Registered Associate, which has 4 streams: operations, procurement, logistics, and integrated logistics support. This is a great way to get started in the professional accreditation scheme, with 150 eligibility points to evidence for that registration. There's also a new self-assessment tool on our website, so please head to the registration tab to be able to download that Excel spreadsheet and use it as a career guidance for yourself in terms of working out if you're eligible for registration. There's also a whole lot of new registration benefits as well. There was a great webinar last week. If you can download that from our YouTube channel, it goes through those benefits in detail. And it's, of course, it's free for ASCI members. So it's really encouraging you all to apply. And it won't affect your member benefits or your corporate member benefits either. So on to some updates about what's on in our continued professional development program. We're running 2 last classes for APICS until the end of the year, and they are CLTD and CPIM Part 1, otherwise known as the Basics of Supply Chain Management. These are going to be 2-hour sessions, which is a great way to sneak in some professional development before the end of the year. And good luck to our students who are currently sitting their APICS exams as well from the spring term. There's a new Oliver White course on integrated tactical planning coming up soon, and ASCI members get a benefit of a great discount to that short course. And congratulations to Augustus Sumida Pereira for completing the Anaplan University Connect program. There was 47 ASCI members who participated in the program, and most of them are on their way to completing. Augustus was just the first, so we'll have a great article from him in the next newsletter to tell us all about it. Good luck to our university teams who are competing in the global ASCM case competition, partnering with Deloitte. It's still time to register. If you can put together a university team, please let us know. At ASCI, we'd love to support you. And last year, our team made it through to the regionals in Singapore, so we were really excited about that. Our upcoming webinars, starting next week, is Deloitte presenting on control towers. This will be a really in-depth presentation with 3 partners and directors from Deloitte. So our New South Wales chapter will be hosting that. Please don't miss out. And the week after, we have a really interesting presentation brought to you by the WA chapter on data insights into your most valuable assets. You can register to all of these events via the CPD tab on our website under events. And just to recap with you as well before I kickstart the introductions today is our vision and mission, because we have recently aligned all of our vision and mission for our 2025 strategy. The vision, advancing supply chain as a recognised profession within Australasia, is our overall vision, and the mission is underneath of that is the professional accreditation scheme, the continued professional development program, our advocacy, and growing the community through our chapters. So these are really important pillars of achieving that vision. And then, of course, under the professional accreditation scheme, there's a lot of work going on right now in ethics, risks, and technical committees. So these committees are formed with volunteers from our community, many of whom are registered under the scheme, and they support you in terms of your career and profession. So the Ethics Committee, for example, houses the Code of Ethics and manages the Ethics Management Program. And that includes a complaints and disciplinary procedure program with complaints appeals processes in line with Australian legislation. And you'll see some upcoming webinars that the Ethics Committee are also hosting, which include some important information about how you can protect yourselves and also work ethically within your profession. The Risk Committee looks after the management guidelines, the risk profiling, risk mitigation strategies, which will include supply chain risk workshops once we get back to face-to-face. Chain of Responsibility, Australian Trusted Trade Initiative, and is aligned with indemnity insurance schemes as well. And our technical committee looks to a globally aligned knowledge base and glossary and has a supply chain management knowledge glossary of terms and definitions, which is available in our resources section on our website. Our registration pathway, this isn't to say that you must start at the associate level. You can certainly, if you are eligible for practitioner, go straight to the practitioner level, and both associate and practitioner levels are free for ASCI members until February next year. After that point, practitioners are $375 per annum and associates are $275 per annum as per the ASCI individual membership. And in 2025, we'll have the registered professional level available to you. So without further ado, I'll ask our first keynote to unmute himself and also show his face on the camera for you all. Denzil Rodrigues is Operations Manager for Weston in New Zealand, Auckland, and he's our SCOR instructor. Denzil is a supply chain management practitioner focused on process improvements in purchasing, warehousing, and distribution. He is a certified Six Sigma Green Belt, and his specialties are total cost of ownership, operations and freight management, process improvements and productivity measures in warehouse operations. And he is also an APICS instructor in CPIM and CSCP as well as SCOR. Welcome to you, Denzil, and I'll hand over to you.
Thank you, Monique. Thank you for that lovely introduction. Team, looking forward to this presentation, having a chat on the SCOR framework, saying that it's an interesting time that we are in midst of at the moment. Currently, the supply chains are stretched. You would have seen issues around freight movements and a whole lot of other things. Well, besides that, this is a time to upgrade your knowledge as well. And without getting into more detail on what we could or could not do, let's get into the SCOR framework. So when I got this opportunity, when Monique said we were wanting, ASCI was trying to do a webinar on the SCOR framework, I thought it's a good opportunity for people to understand what SCOR is, how it assists companies and individuals to get better in managing their supply chains. So the topics that we're going to cover today is what is SCOR. We will define SCOR, what's the SCOR process framework, advantages of using the SCOR framework, the structure of the SCOR model, how is SCOR implemented, i.e. what's the SCOR improvement program racetrack, how does it go, and finally outcomes from a successful SCOR improvement project. With that, let's move to the presentation part. So what you see on the screen is what is SCOR. Now, SCOR was founded as a supply chain improvement methodology. It uses process analysis, performance metrics, and best practices to improve supply chains by identifying performance gaps, guiding organizational change management, and providing analysis needed to drive improvement programs to achieve levels of supply chain performance. The SCOR framework itself was developed in early 1990s by a consulting firm. Now it's a mouthful, but guys, please bear with me. It's Pitiglio, Rabin, Todd, and McGrath, so PRTM for short, along with AMR Research, and were ably assisted from individuals from corporations like Bayer, Compaq, Procter & Gamble, Lockheed Martin, and others to develop a methodology to improve supply chain performance. At the moment, SCOR has more than 700 companies. Now, guys, I listed out a few companies. Some of you may not have heard of Compaq, but Compaq was a computer manufacturing company who had bought out another computer manufacturing company called Digital, and then Compaq got bought out by Hewlett Packard. So these are all multinational corporations who have uh, uh, valid inputs into the SCOR framework. Why is SCOR important? The history of SCOR is important basically for two reasons. SCOR is a tool created by and for practitioners to improve supply chains. SCOR best practices arise from real world examples. These are not theoretical uh, uh, principles or policies that people want to implement. These are real world examples. The other bit is SCOR is a living document. It is not one size fits all, or it is set once and it doesn't go forward. So information is constantly being developed, researched, rethought to enhance the SCOR model. We are on the version SCOR 12.0 at the moment, right? So it's graduated from 1.0 to right up to 12.0. Continuous evaluation, rethinking, and constantly being developed and researched. Monique, next slide, please. Okay, on the screen you see the SCOR definition. Now, I will allow you to absorb that, but I want to highlight there are three key words in that definition. Let me start with the first. The ultimate purpose of SCOR is to develop supply chains that focus on satisfying customer demand. SCOR views the supply chain as consisting of 6 fundamental processes: plan, source, make, deliver, return, enable. Now, these are the 6 processes. We will touch base back to these on a later slide, but understand that these are the 6 fundamental processes that SCOR views as a part of a supply chain. SCOR is a supply chain improvement methodology that enables companies to analyze current strategies, quantify performance, perform benchmarking to identify targets for supply chain improvement. Benchmarking here is key. And the third key part of the definition is the SCOR contains a detailed, comprehensive set of performance metrics and best practices that companies can use to evaluate their supply chain performance. So there is a data set available to companies to compare their performance against what other companies are doing. Moving to the next slide. So the goal of the SCOR framework is to assist supply chains to solve business problems and improve processes and performance. So let's look at the 4 objectives that you see on the screen. The first objective is to pursue continuous supply chain improvement by closely examining business processes and activities in detail. They are then mapped and validated if they make sense. This part is called the disconnect analysis, which is the first pillar on the left of this slide. The second objective is to compare supply chain performance to other supply chains at all the levels and benchmarking like for like measures. At this stage, we call it the defect analysis, which is the second pillar from the left. The third objective is to examine existing supply chain practices and identify all practices and technology solutions that result in significantly better performance. This is the future state, which is the third pillar, best practices. The fourth and final objective is to design organizations engaged in continuous learning and skill enhancement and is focused on performance. The uniqueness and power of this framework is chiefly derived from using these 4 elements together with predefined relationships between processes. So this is, as the tagline says, these SCORE combines the 4 techniques in a single integrated approach. Next slide, please, Monique. So now we are talking of advantage of using the SCORE framework. The advantages are on the screen. Instead of me lip reading or reading those out, let me give you a different perspective. SCORE provides a top-down approach, and remember, top-down approach to assessing and managing supply chain performance. The goal here is to ensure that performance metrics arising out of the SCORE program are aligned with strategic objectives of the business. The SCORE framework enables strategic planners to perform a fact-based reality check on the business's operational competitiveness. An effective SCORE program will enable planners to structure the performance objective of a to-be state, which in turn drives program selection priorities, ensuring the creation of SCORE programs that focus on improving the whole system. So this is where we are talking of creating or choosing projects that will deliver the maximum advantage aligned to our business strategy. Okay, moving on. Now talking of the structure of the SCORE model. So the SCORE model basically consists of performance, processes, practices, and people. So from the performance perspective, there are 5 high-level performance attributes: reliability, responsiveness, agility, cost, and asset management. Now, reliability, responsiveness, agility are outward looking. That is looking from the company towards the customer of what we can deliver to the customer. Cost and asset management are inward looking. The company is looking at itself. How can it manage its cost better? Again, it's not only cost reduction. It is managing cost and managing your assets. And that's why these are inward looking performance attributes. The next come the processes. As we touched upon earlier, there are 6 processes that we talk about in SCORE, which is plan, source, make, deliver, return, and enable. In practices, there are 3 major practices that we talk about: emerging practice, best practice, and standard practice. And in terms of people, 3 key terms that come up: skills, experience, and training. So this is the basic structure of the SCORE model. Let's look at the SCORE improvement program racetrack. Monique, if you could move to the next slide, please. Okay, so what you see on your screen is the SCORE improvement program racetrack. It consists of 5 phases. Don't get into the detail of it at the moment, because when you go through a SCORE program, you will understand this a bit more. We don't start with phase 1, we call it phase 0, and phase 0 is the pre-SCORE program steps. Typically, an organization choosing to go through a SCORE improvement program, the pre-SCORE program steps take about 3 months. The next step is phase 1, which is set the scope, which is setting the scope of the SCORE program itself. If you are stretched for time, you can do it in 2 months. If you want to allow time for normal business tasks to occur as well, it could take up to 3 months, but allow a quarter. The next phase, or phase 2, is configure the supply chain. This takes approximately I would think it would take 3 months. The next is optimizing projects, which will take around 2 months. And the last one is phase 4, which is ready for implementation. And this is where we start implementing the projects we have identified or chosen to execute. And this could take up to a year. Now, It is not a quick fix 1-year program. It takes a substantial amount of time to run a SCOR implementation, but you don't have to wait till the end to see results come through. Results can start coming in within the first 6 months. Yeah. The thing that you need to realize here is also at every phase stage, you will see a gate. The gate is a point where a go, no go decision is made. Who makes that decision? The executive sponsor, the project champion. The project champion and the project team will make a presentation to the executive sponsor, and they will decide a go, no go. So right up to when you get to ready for implementation, you are still going through a phase of evaluating whether you want to progress further or not. Okay. If you've got to the stage of ready for implementation, you exactly know what you're trying to achieve. It is not a halfway house. It is a staged move from one level to the next, deciding and identifying what needs to happen. Okay, Monique, next slide, please. Okay, this is a key slide. When I say a key slide, what would you expect as an outcome from a successful SCOR improvement program? Depending on who you want to listen to, and the data that I'm going to share with you comes from Peter Bolstroff's book, Supply Chain Excellence. Peter Bolstroff has been a pioneer in SCOR. He has implemented over 100 projects, and his book, edition 3, basically is a good read. If you want to be a SCOR practitioner, go and read that book. Of course, the SCOR methodology and the ASCM SCOR offering is good, but so is to get a fair understanding of how SCOR works. It's in very simple, lucid language, and a real company case study that how things have moved in that company on the SCOR implementation. So coming back to this last slide, the operating income improvement from cost reduction and service improvements in the initial SCOR project portfolio averages around 3% of the total sales. Now, depending on how the company compares benchmark data, and that's key, how you compare benchmark data, it could be as high as 4.5% or as low as 1.5%. ROI, or return on investment, of 2 to 6 times within 12 months, often with cost neutral quick hit projects underway on a 6-month time frame. As I said, you don't have to wait till the end to see gains. You could see that happening in a 6 months time. Don't wait. If you can see some cost neutral quick hit projects, get them done. Full leverage of capital investment in the systems, improving return on assets for fixed asset technology investments. Reduced information technology operating expenses. How come? Through reduced need for customization and improved use of standard system functions. Guys, ask any IT project implementation person. He will tell you the most amount of money and time is taken by customization. If you start using standard systems, it is quicker, it is cheaper, not only to implement, but to maintain. And the last one is ongoing profit improvement from 0.5 to 1% per year. Now, that's does not sound big, but if you're talking of profit increase from 0.5 to 1%, that is sizable. And how does that happen? Using continuous supply chain improvement. Guys, as Monique mentioned, questions will be right at the end when the other keynote speaker also has presented his bit. So I'll be open to questions after that. And thank you, Monique.
Thank you so much, Denzil. And we can take expressions of interest for the next SCOR P class as well, which are virtual. They're 3-day courses that Denzil will teach online for now. So introducing our next keynote speaker, Michiel Jorna, Director Business Transformation APAC for SoftwareAG. Michael specialises in helping organisations to gain greater end-to-end visibility of operations and the transparency needed to make impactful, future-proof business decisions. He gained experience in various managing consulting roles over the past 20 years and led many innovative and successful implementation projects in international settings. Michael holds a master's degree in business administration from Nijmegen University in the Netherlands, is Lean Six Sigma Black Belt trained, and is certified information privacy professional. Welcome, Michael, and yeah, off you go. I'll control the screens for you.
All right, thank you very much, Monique. Thank you for that very kind introduction, and welcome to everybody in the webinar. I'm quite excited to actually be here today with you, because I strongly believe that the SCOR framework and the methodology is also outlined by Denzil in his part of the presentation of the session, are of huge value to organizations when applied correctly. At the same time, and Monique, maybe you can move to the next slide, it's important to realize that continuous and sustainable improvement can only be realized if this is really fully embedded in the organization's way of working. Denzil, you mentioned this is not a one-off or a one-time project or initiative. This is very much about building a capability in the organization to enable business transformation and enable continuous improvement capabilities that are fully embedded in the operating model of the organization, in the way of working. So it's really much combining the business model, which is all about doing the right things, your objectives, your strategies, your goals, the products and services that you are in or that you are aiming for, and link that to the underlying operating model and the way that you organize yourself as an organization in terms of your processes, in terms of your IT architectures, your underlying supply chain systems, and really make sure that these are brought together. This is typically a challenge that we see in many organizations, actually, where there is a disconnect between those two areas. It's easy to say, okay, these are the strategies that we want to achieve, but how do we really make sure that that is broken down into specific requirements, into specific processes that deliver on those outcomes? And I believe that that is very much about also where a successful SCOR implementation is really about really connecting and linking strategy down to execution. Maybe can you go to the next slide, Monique? Because what we also see in organizations is that typically information and responsibilities reside across the different organizational silos, often also in different formats, in PowerPoints, in Word documents, in Excel files, maybe local databases or repository or specific point solutions that are targeting a dedicated functional part of the organization, which really makes it difficult to create that end-to-end transparency and insight that is required to make the right decisions. And this is problematic because in order to really get a deep understanding of best practice process management, you need this insight. You need to understand the dynamics of your business processes and how they relate to your targeted business outcomes and business model in order to really, and also to connect to the underlying supply chain management system. So that is really something that requires, and Monique, can you go to the next slide, please? Where an approach is required that aligns strategy to processes, as I mentioned before, as well as with the underlying application systems and the underlying supply chain systems to make that happen. And this is basically where professional business process management or enterprise management platforms such as ARIES, which I'm going to share with you in a minute, come into play to really enable this full life cycle of continuous improvement, starting with strategy. So starting with your business model, your value chains, maybe taking into account your customer expectations, your customer journey, and really break that down into your the way that you organize yourself, your process landscape, what skill sets are required in order to deliver on those processes, what applications do we need to put in place to make sure that that process is optimized, implemented, of course, because that's really an important step. Once you design, that design needs to be implemented. Any improvement needs also to be effectuated in the end in your way of working, and communicated, implemented as such. And ultimately, by using analytics techniques, by using maybe techniques such as process mining, I'll come back to that in a minute as well, really to understand also and to get a view and get transparency in the actual execution of that process, and to start monitoring and maybe simulating the actual, let's say, different variants of processes, allowing you to benchmark best practices against current practices, and then maybe learn from that and also derive new improvement potential. So closing really that loop from strategy to design to execution and then to monitoring, that is really an important, let's say, requirement in order to bring the APICS methodology and the SCOR framework and the associated best practices to life. And this is also the reason, maybe Monique, can you go to the next slide, please? This is the reason why APICS and SoftwareAG engaged in a partnership together with our technology partner, VEA, Visual Enterprise Architecture, to create something which we call the ARIES SCOR BPM Accelerator. And this is an accelerator which is powered by ARIES software, process management platform that really enables you to that enables global supply chain organizations to implement the SCOR framework in a faster way, and to manage this in a better and in a more controlled fashion, to design, to manage, and to measure your global supply chain processes using the SCOR levels 1 through level 5 metrics as such. And this really boosts the power of the SCOR model exponentially by making it easier to customize the framework to your specific organizational needs, and to really help you to get this understanding, to analyze your supply chain processes, to really understand the different dependencies that also Denzil was talking about. Of course, documentation and designing your supply chain strategy, processes, and architectures, but also give you capabilities to start simulating and analyzing that, and really help to continuously analyze and improve supply chain performance. Can you go to the next slide for me, Monique? So having a quick, a bit closer look into what this accelerator is about. Here you can see basically the SCOR process framework. Can be viewed from different levels, level 1, level 2, level 3 diagrams. So you can navigate that from top down into more detail. And each of those, let's say, level 2 and level 3 processes in the SCOR framework also has additional detail with the associated practices, with the performance metrics, the inputs, the outputs, that also Denzil introduced earlier in his part of the presentation. If you go to the next slide, you will see that there is an example of that shows this basically in a bit more detail for one of the detailed processes: identify, prioritize, and aggregate resources, as you can see here. And this is also where you can see the actual link to the practices. Indeed, and Denzil, you refer to that as well, the practices that have been can be classified as either emerging, best practice, or standard practices. which is also visualized here in different symbol types. It has the full descriptions of those practices. It allows you to link practices to different types of processes if required. The skills, the experience, and the trainings that are required actually to support such a process in a successful way are available, as well as the performance metrics, the KPIs, that measure the effectiveness of those processes and measure also ultimately the whether the strategic objectives or the objectives itself are being realized. And inputs and outputs are there to describe really the data that is being used in the process as such. If you go to the next slide, Monique, that's showing you then also the people perspective to this. As well as, and this is not a complete picture, but just to give you a view on that different matrices. This is a relational database. It brings all the different SCOR components together in a single repository that you can then use to adapt it. Maybe select it, what is relevant for your initiative, and then really make it your own and tailor it to the needs of your own organization without really having to build this completely from scratch. And in that way, really use this as an accelerator to build a solid foundation for documentation, but more importantly, for continuous optimization of your organization. So, Monique, can you hit the next slide, please? This is then also a very solid foundation for the actual rollout, because once you have designed a new process and optimized the process, then that needs to be rolled out, of course. And that means on the one hand side, this may include systems, but whatever whether that includes system changes or not, ultimately the people in the organization, the people who execute those processes, need to be informed about that. And this is another thing that you can use ARIES for, to really support the rollout to the information to the people in the workforce. Understanding, so this is basically just another view of the process in an easy to navigate step view to show you what information is part of that new process, including work instructions, including descriptions, maybe including video explainers even, to bring the information in a very targeted and role-based fashion to the people who are required to use this. Well, I think this works two ways as well, because this not only give you, let's say, a perspective on, okay, how do we really link strategy down to process, down to the details of the execution in the organization, but also it works the other way around. I, as an employee in the organization, can also see what processes I'm involved in and how that links back to why we are doing this, and what objectives are associated with this, and how this basically supports the organization in achieving the overall strategies and objectives. Next slide, please. It doesn't stop here. Because we are talking about design and then about communication of that design. And what I mentioned before, what we see more and more is that organizations start to adopt techniques such as process mining to really understand the actual execution of the process. So this is where you can basically discover the actual execution sequence of the processes based on underlying traces extracted from system log files, and reconstruct the process that was executed, and then basically benchmark and compare it to the process that you designed, to do performance, or let's say conformance check. Are we really executing the process that we designed it to be? And what is the delta? And why is the delta there? What type of analysis can we do to really understand the reasons why, you know, our KPIs are maybe not where we want them to be, and use mining analytics to understand the root causes of those let's say bottlenecks in the process. So that brings really closes the loop from strategy to design to monitoring really the execution in the underlying processes. And then Monique, if you bring the next slide, please. That is really what ultimately you can work towards, is to really have this enterprise management system, as I refer to about. Some people talk about the digital twin of the organization. This is very much about creating the digital representation of your business, by means of process designs and by means of all the different content components of the SCOR framework, but also then to connect that to the underlying reality using, for instance, process mining techniques. So to really align business design versus business execution and use that information to better make decisions on how to optimize, where to optimize, and to make that really a continuous process. So that's more the horizontal view that you see here in this slide. On the other hand side, of course, and Denzil, you refer to that as well, understanding the business process and adopting best practices is also very much key to drive automation initiatives and not start to, allow and to customize every single situation, but really adopt best practices and use those process best practices also to drive automation decisions and automation initiatives. So that's, Monique, if you can go to the next slide. And I would like to be relatively quickly here because Denzil, you mentioned also about the typical advantages. And these are some examples of what our customer achieved, and these are typical indeed in the area of increased process efficiency, quality increasement, cost reduction, as well as, again, really being able to implement business strategy and give management a mechanism to continuously run and close that loop from strategy to execution. With that having said, and I think there's one more slide that refers to the website of the Association of the Supply Chain Management. As you can see here, where you will find more detailed information as well about this BPM Accelerator powered by ARIES that I refer to. So if you're interested, feel free to navigate here. You'll find more details on the actual product offering. You can also find more details on who to contact the corporate development for more info, for demonstrations, or additional inputs on this. And of course, I'm also more than happy, either as part of this webinar or as a follow-up. Monique, I think you also shared the contact details of both Denzil and myself. I'm more than happy to follow up with additional information or answering questions. So with that having said, I would like to hand over back to you, Monique.
Great. Thank you, Michiel. Thank you both for really great presentations today. We'll open up for question time, and there's one already in the Q&A box. So I think it's good if both of you give perspective on each of these questions. Coming from a theoretical and a technical background, I think it's handy. So David Hogg asks, is there a path for an individual to become SCOR certified if you don't have the opportunity of working in an organisation that is actually going to implement SCOR? That's probably over to you, Denzil.
Yeah, David, a good question. And I was wondering, if you want to do a SCOR certification, it is important that you see that you can have an implementation part of it. Doing a SCOR certification by itself, yes, will give you the breadth of knowledge of what exactly we are trying to achieve, but to get the nuts and bolts of it and experience it first time, you need to go through the benchmarking process, the process of shortlisting projects and finally implementing them. But if you want to do a SCOR P certification endorsement, it's not a certification, it's an endorsement. You can certainly choose a path going through a structured instructed course, sitting an exam and getting your SCOR P endorsement. I hope that answers your question.
Yeah, thank you. But from your perspective, Michiel, do you see that your clients are all SCOR P endorsed in order to run that in their organizations?
Well, I think it definitely is something that gives a great outline and also starting point for really understanding the whole concept of process improvement, right? I think, specifically aligned to the context of supply chain management is, of course, an additional benefit. But I think in general, business optimization, business transformation is really helped with, getting yourself familiar with these types of frameworks. So I would definitely see that as an added value for anyone who is involved in these types of topics.
Okay, a question's come through the chat box. What process improvement methodology does SCOR employ or use? Denzil?
Yeah, so Monique, as we outlined, this SCOR P is a framework. You can use any methodology you like: Six Sigma, Lean, theory of constraints. It works well with any. It does not prescribe a methodology. It will work with every methodology. Whatever continuous improvement methodologies you want to employ, that's free. SCOR provides a framework of measuring and evaluating the outcomes.
Yeah, great. What do you think, Michiel, to that question?
Yeah, well, I would like to add to that I'm fully with you on this, Denzil. And also when we then talk about, you know, a platform, a business process management platform such as ARIES is also really about making sure that all those different types of methodologies and the people who are applying those methodologies are doing that in a collaborative way. These practices are not new. Process optimization techniques have been around for many years in different, let's say, shapes and forms, and that I believe that will continue to be. But I think the real challenge is really bringing that together and making sure that everybody who is involved in business optimization, are using and are collaborating together to make sure that the end goals are achieved. So I think this is where both a framework such as the SCOR framework, as well as in combination with a software platform such as ARIES, are really great assets to support that.
There's a question here from Brendan O'Keefe, our New South Wales chapter president. Is the SCOR process better applied or more successful for certain types of supply chains? Good question. For example, manufacturing process supply chains versus diverse logistics distribution organizations.
So SCOR can be applied to any supply chain, whether it's manufacturing or purely distribution, right? We pick up the parts that impact us. So if it's a distribution supply chain, it will not maybe source, plan, make, deliver, return, enable. We may drop the make bit, but we may still say source, plan, source, plan, deliver, return, enable. We would still have that. So SCOR is not specifically for manufacturing. It can be applied to any supply chain.
Great. Your thoughts, Michiel?
Yeah, I concur with that. I fully agree. And I think that is also what most, you know, process optimization methodologies have in common. It's in a way agnostic of the actual content. It's around applying the methodologies and applying the actual practices around this. And I think that is applicable for a wide variety of supply chains in this case.
Yeah, sure. Darren Haynes asked for the author of the book that you mentioned, Denzil, and Peter Bolstroff. He's also keynoting at our conference next year in February to talk about ASCM's impact program with the Melinda and Bill Gates Foundation. So he's definitely on our radar too. So we can definitely share that book with everybody afterwards. Do you remember, what is it called exactly, Denzil?
Supply Chain Excellence. It's 3rd edition now.
3rd edition.
Yep.
Supply Chain Excellence. 100 SCOR projects. There you go. You can have a look at that. Yep. Gustav Volchenks asked, previously SCOR was only available in the USA. Is this now available in Australia?
Yes, it is. So it's available everywhere, anywhere that ASCM offers courses, SCOR's available.
Yep. Fantastic. David Hogg has another question. Given the dynamic changes in supply chains, for example, globalization, COVID-19, onshoring, trade wars, etc., how easy is it to review and revise SCOR benchmark processes using SoftwareAG or just in general?
Yeah, I think that is, from my perspective, really one of the key, let's say, values of using a platform such as ARIES, because by having, let's say, the relationships between your objectives, between what that means for your processes, the requirements, the linking back to the underlying application systems, the roles and the responsibilities, to build that, let's say, framework of interdependencies that really drives and enables you to be much more agile and much more quick in order to adapt to changes. If your strategy changes, or you just have regulatory requirements coming in that require you to adapt, you can see immediately what is the impact on the way that you have organized yourself. And I think that is really one of the key drivers for organizations to invest in these types of platforms, to be quicker and to be more agile and more fast to respond to these types of changing circumstances, of which I'm sure that we will only see more in the future.
Denzil, your comments on that?
Sorry, I missed that one.
Oh, that's okay. Moving on. Denzil,
Yep.
Marco's asked you a question, actually. It's an important one. Denzil, do you use maturity assessments to guide enterprise transformational efforts? If so, do you have any source tools in mind?
Good question, Marco. See, when you talk of maturity assessments, the point is, if you are using a SCOR framework, and let's assume you're using Lean or Six Sigma. Six Sigma will follow the DMAIC. So the analyze phase is where the maturity assessment anyways happens, right? What are the source tools you could use? Again, as I say, you could use Six Sigma, you could use Lean methodologies, or you could use any other continuous improvement technique that are in vogue to do that. Again, SCOR does not prescribe you a specific set. Does that answer your question?
Let's see if he responds to that. How critical, in your view, is the focus on the people and culture aspect of transformation efforts?
This is a question across the board, besides SCOR, on everything. Unless you carry your team together, or everyone is not pulling in the same direction, we would not get the expected results. So it is important. And you know, when I went for my SCOR training, I sat amongst a group of 18 people who were all from one company, who were all going through the SCOR courseware, not for the endorsement sake, because that company was rolling out the SCOR implementation. So they wanted all their staff or their key team leads to be on board through the SCOR implementation, and go through that process to understand where this company is headed. So getting buy-in from all team members is key.
Yeah, Michael, your thoughts on that one?
Yeah, fully agree on that. I think in any change or in any transformation initiative, I think the people aspect is probably the most important one. Technically, you can implement or design processes or new ways of working. Ultimately, you really need to make sure that the people who are responsible for those and who are involved in those are really aligned to this as well. So I would say that that's one of the most critical aspects for sure.
Can it also be used for skills gaps analysis as you're looking through the skills required for each step, Denzil?
Yes. So there is, as a part of the preparing for the implementation, the SCOR framework allows you to identify the skills that will be needed in the to-be state, and how do you fulfill that gap, whether it's through education, training, whether it's ACM courses or courses elsewhere. How do you bridge that gap? What you're to get to your to-be state is also a part of the SCOR implementation.
Okay, can SCOR be applied to your supplier's supplier and customer's customer if you're a highly integrated supply chain?
Yes, it is. So basically what we are, okay, we can talk of supplier or customer's customer, but from a supply chain perspective, we are only treating our suppliers as upstream uh, extensions, and our customers are downstream extensions. We are looking at the supply chain in totality, where we, our company or us, could be the nucleus who's making that supply chain profitable or viable. So yes, you can apply that. Again, it is getting buy-in from those organizations. Today, this competition is not a company to company competition, guys. When you get out in the marketplace today, it's supply chain versus supply chain. So the more you upskill or make your supply chain efficient, and if it goes to your supplier and their supplier as well, and goes to your customer and their customer as well, the more efficient you are, profitability for everyone.
That's good in a perfect world, but Michael, what's your opinion on that?
Well, I mean, what we see also in the way that that ARIES is used, that could typically also involve customer processes or processes of suppliers, because ultimately what you would like to achieve is to really manage the end-to-end cycle, and that could spin across different types of organizations. So I think it makes perfect sense to really look into that from a real end-to-end perspective. Yeah, we have multiple examples also in government, for instance, where they're really bringing all these different stakeholders together that ultimately make the anticipated outcome successful, bring them together and take that as a part of, let's say, the analysis and scope of the initiative.
And we're running out of time, so just final closing statements from each of you as to what your key takeouts are from today. Denzil, if you can share yours first.
Yeah, so to all the attendees on this webinar, all I'm saying is, if you're looking to do a SCOR certification, see where you see yourself applying it. Okay, doing a certification is good, but making sure you are able to apply that body of knowledge is key. Again, I did SCOR. I have done a couple of projects. I'm looking to do more and actively looking to participate with or collaborate with like-minded agencies or companies who would want to implement SCOR. So that's my take.
And Michael?
Yeah, maybe in addition to that, and I touched upon that in the presentation as well, and I also now see Marco's question coming in around governance. I think if you want to successfully implement any type of methodology, whether it is SCOR or whether it is anything else, it's really important to make that sustainable and to embed that in your way of working of your organization. And that indeed also means that you need to have governance in place, ownership on end-to-end processes, because otherwise it will be a one-time initiative and all the effort will be lost and not, let's say, not valid anymore at some point. So really make this part of the way that you run your business. That would be my key takeaway of this.
Fantastic. Denzil, Michael, thank you so much for your participation and preparation that's gone into today's webinar. Can everyone please raise their hands to thank Denzil and Michael for joining us today and sharing their expertise. So we've got some great claps going, virtual claps going for you. Really appreciate it. We will be staying back a little bit longer, myself in any case, to answer any questions about registration. But Denzil, yourself and Michael, you're welcome to leave the webinar, and yeah, we look forward to spending some more time with you on our future CPD programs.
Thank you, Monique. Much appreciated.
So if you're interested in